So I am curious to get perhaps one, perhaps two quick samples about something you cultivated in your loom. Anybody who feels ready to share what you integrated to the loom of your soul inquiries, please.
Yeah, I'm just gonna share an inspiration that came from Peter, if you allow me, Peter. It was a question about what is the purity of the soul, what is a clean soul, and what it was suggested. It's in the sense of being like a child, innocent, pure, and spontaneous, and in a more mature age is sticking to one's intentions and honor. I found that fascinating, and thank you, Peter, for bringing that in our conversation.
Well, thank you. You actually, without knowing, but then I always say these processes, when we work together, are more intelligent than any one of us, certainly more intelligent than me. So I see the other hand, but you gave me an entry, so I'm going to use it. Stay here with me, actually, and let's bring Avshalom, and then we'll lead into this. Please, Avshalom.
Yes, one interesting territory that was opened in the breakout room is to do with the connection between the soul and the centers, particularly the instinct, in relation to fears.
Okay.
So, something to consider, because we have a long range of fears, some to do with the lower aspects of the soul, survival and all the rest of it, and the other is to do with fulfillment or development or not missing out on the human potential. So that range of question arose.
Right. There's a whole loom there in your few paragraphs. That sounds exciting. Well, so here is where it leads me next and again, the beauty of what we are doing is the concurrency of process. I am populating the loom in one way. That's the way I felt I was guided in the last 2 days as I thought about our journey here today. Probably next week I would configure it differently. And the beauty is you can configure it any way you choose. So with this first comment from Kyriaki, sharing from what Peter brought to the room, I want to introduce the paradox of attuning to the soul. Here is the paradox of attuning to the soul. You actually cannot attune to the soul as a first step. You must first release and cleanse all or most or as much as you can of what is alien, what is foreign to your soul. What has been imposed, what has been arresting your soul. All those things we talked about before. So, and then, as a second step, you must also, I'm quite deliberately using the strong word must, to make the point, to be provocative. You must balance and regulate the push and pull of all these inner lives. That's the point that surfaced in the earlier part when Peter spoke about, well, how do I differentiate between these parts? And once I begin to differentiate, how do I manage and regulate the cacophonous, sometimes noise that's created from the cross-purpose, sometimes the internal fighting of those different parts, different voices, these inner lives. How do we facilitate harmony? And is there a way to find harmony even in the places where there is disharmony and still find wholeness and intactness? So I'm suggesting actually step one is a cleansing and releasing work. And step 2 is balancing and regulation work. And step 3 is, well, you've got to do some individuation work, because it's not very helpful if you're going to attune to just the collective soul, the soul of the family, the soul of the tribe, because, or just the soul of the culture, if I can borrow the word in that sense. There isn't exactly a soul in the same way, but there is a belief system or an operating system that will suggest itself as what's in vogue, if we can bring this word into the conversation. And what's in vogue is sometimes auto-suggesting itself as the way of your soul when it isn't. So there is a journey of individuating to facilitate the true discovery of attuning to your natural configuration. That's why we said earlier in the first part, well, what if you need to follow a path that's not approved or not validated by others? That may be part of your soul journey. It often is. And then, as you begin to individuate, there may be is the place for step 4, which is, that's the point where you can begin to connect with finer and higher, more luminescent presences and blessings that will fill your life. By filling your life, they begin to work on you rather than just you working on you. And can you guess what's the natural 5th step that occurs after step 3 and step 4? I think many of you would be able to guess. You are naturally called to offer service, to serve in some way, small or large, in whatever circumstance you're in. So not everybody needs to serve by way of teaching. Some may serve by taking care of somebody they love, and some may serve by simply making every place they walk into a little brighter and a little tidier. There are just endless ways we find that we are naturally wired to serve. And so, friends, here is the paradox. I'm suggesting these are 5 ways, but here is the paradox of the soul's journey. Indeed, first you need to cleanse. Second, you need to balance. Third, you need to attune. Fourth, you'll naturally connect to those presences and powers and more than human realms that are present with us here in this realm. And you naturally be guided to serve. You naturally want to do these 5 things. But here is the paradox. You actually need to engage in all 5 concurrently. That's the paradox. Why? Because it is service sentiment, it is service orientation, it's wanting to dedicate ourselves to help something, to be in service to something. That is the most conductive and inductive pathway for the soul and for the blessing realms, the higher, finer, sometimes also called astral planes. Those finer realms, they are attracted to a conduit, to a vessel that is ready to serve. When that orientation is in place, when I say, let me today be a useful instrument for our discovery into the soul, I'm instructing myself. It's not about me. It's not about my ego. It's not about what I think I know. It's about the collective process. It's about what we give rise to together. It's about encouraging and facilitating others into the discovery with their soul. It's not about directing other people to what I say. It's about using what I say and what we together bring into creating together an ecology that will become inductive, attractive, conductive, and encouraging for others to get attuned to their soul. When I instruct myself in this way, I become more available for those presences and atmospherics and unseen, invisible lives that are always nearby, ready to serve the human cause. And, when I do so, they take care of me. They effectively cleanse me. They effectively balance me. They effectively help me attune. So that's the paradox. You actually want to work on all those five. My orientation is I have to take responsibility. I have to do my cleansing, my balancing, my attuning. When I do so, I become more attractive. And at the same time, I always remember that I'm ultimately uplifted, not by myself, but by something else that uplifts me, that guides me, that inspires me to be of service to the human cause. So we each are wired differently, and we each will find the cosmology of sentiments that would be most attractive for us to enter the contemplation and the alignment, the attunement of service. What is implicit in what I'm saying is that the easiest, best way, or one of the fastest way, I said earlier in the first part, don't use the word only, so I'm not using the word only, but I am saying for many, we find that the fastest path to attuning to the soul is to seeking how you can help somebody else, or how can you be in service to something. Because why? Because the soul has a built-in service orientation in its first, second, and third lives. In the three impulses of the soul, they are essentially service impulses. So, friends, that's the paradox of the soul's journey. And now I want us to play even more with building the loom and with bringing several looms into it. So what might you do to attune to your soul in a deeper, more profound way? Well, one thing you could do is discover how you can be of service. There is something unique about your presence. There is something unique about your configuration. There is something unique about your experience in life and the qualities and properties, the spiritual properties, the soul properties that you cultivated in yourself, and the capacities that you brought to life. So we need your presence here. We need your contribution. We need your leadership. We need your service in whatever way you can offer that service. And one way to attune in a deeper way to your soul is to discover how you can be of service. Not the only way, but it's one profound and profoundly accelerating way. And as you do so, you continue to inquire what is nourishing and uplifting to your soul, and how are you naturally wired to be of service? You continue this discovery. Like in my own discovery and example, like I've been quite a reluctant teacher, in the sense that I never believed we were in the time of teaching or teachers. I've always believed we have entered the time of collective discovery, mutualized discovery, and that my calling is more to do the kind of workshopping, live workshopping and facilitation for people to become their own self-directed teachers and be a catalyst for people's own soul's journey. And So a year ago, we published this article that essentially described the end of the guru era, and a few weeks after that, the body of work portals into the soul emerged. So I noticed, I recognized the universe had a sense of humor about it. I declared that it was the end of the guru era, and that certainly I was not going to take the teacher mode. And a few weeks after that, I was called to develop this body of work, which is bringing new teaching. So it's an example that the journey of discovering how we are wired to serve is not a straight line. Often it's a circuitous and can be a confusing, sometimes even deranging line of discovery. But that's all part of that sense of not following what you said all in the first part, not following the conventional expectations of others and of yourself, being prepared to follow the path least traveled, being prepared to dance to your own tune, and being prepared to respond in a way that will not be immediately validated. So at this point, I want to see if there is any contribution from anybody to the loom. And after that, there are several more looms that I created for us to go through, and then invite, as in here, your additional contribution to the loom. But let me pause here and see what, this is the loom that emerged with me. What would you add what would you contribute to this open space in the loom from your loom discovery, please?
I have a desire to add here something about self-worth. I know we talked about the being conditioned to seek external validation, and I was thinking that the soul has always been helping us, and so why isn't that enough? To know that there's something that's actually on our side that wants us to always be successful, and then that gets in the way of how we actually feel maybe about ourselves and what we're doing. And in our group, we talked about what happens when your complex is injured or something is going on then with your complex, and you're into the emotion of anger about that, not feeling like you're capable anymore. What is my actual way going to be in the world now? Because I can't be what I used to be. And then, so that can also impact your self-worth. And just thinking again then about the belief in, when you're altered in some way in your complex, that you still have to reach out for that. What is my purpose then? What is my service? Even though I am slowed down and I am now feeling different, and can that in some way be an advantage? I think we talked about it at the beginning of the call too, around moving at different paces and being, the conduit for that kind of speed.
Quite important and timely contribution. Thank you, Margaret, because there is a whole loom of self-worth that we can build, because even in what you just said there is, what's the place of self-worth and how does it relate to your journey into discovering and attuning to the soul? Because a lot of how self-worth has been used specifically, say, in the culture of the 90s and the early, late 20th century, early 21st century, and to an extent now, has been it was a compensation move. It was, you have a low self-esteem, low self-worth, so you need to boost your self-worth and self-esteem. And for many, it became, you could say, a compensatory act. I'm not going to act as though I have tremendous self-worth, but actually, it wasn't a rewiring of the place of self-worth. What you are inviting us to contemplate, and it's a deep inquiry to explore, and I'll just play with this for a bit because it is so important, is, okay, where is the place of self-worth in my cosmology of life? Is it in my personal achievement? Is it in showing up as a confident whatever? Is it in all my worldly achievements? I mean, there is some self-worth that will emerge from that. We will be foolish to ignore that that is something that will provide for people some foundation for self-worth. But if you stay a layer deeper and you inquire, okay, so could it be that there are different dimensions in self-worth, and some are to do with, well, as a child, when you learn to ride the bike, and now you can ride the bike next to your friends riding the bike. As a child, you become confident about riding the bike. There is something you can do. So there is a relationality between self-worth to can-do capacities, right? We don't want to dismiss this. We don't want to deny that. But then you bring in the latter thing you said. Well, so what about as you age and so on, and all of a sudden you cannot do what you did when you were young? Where is the anchor of your self-worth then? And could we consider then that the self-worth and confidence we find is not based in the validation and the confirmation of what other people tell us, but in the inner topography, in the values and the interior assets, and in what we know, what you represent, regardless as to whether other people saw it and appreciate it. It's always easier when we get appreciated. But can we each hold the deeper sense of worth in a place that's actually not personal? Because there is the self-worth, Margaret, about you as a person. And then there is a layer, when I stay with the inquiry longer, where I begin to unearth, there are aspects of self-worth that are not to do with me, the person, but with the fact that I'm a human being at this time. And there is a dimension of worth, of worthiness and worth that is afforded to me because I'm a human being, whether I'm quick or slow, tall or short, eloquent with language or not, highly attuned or less attuned. What about that, the worth that is attached to me because I'm a human being and I've showed up at this time? Again, not as the beginning and the end, but as a dimension that I may choose to consider in the loom of self-worth. So that's why, again, the loom process would be handy here, would be useful, because I'd be writing at the top of the loom, what are my considerations and inquiries about self-worth? And I would be on this one creating one line about what are those things that diminished my self-worth, or I observe with people diminish their self-worth, what is fortifying our self-worth, and then what is perennially there before me and after me that affords and supports self-worth. So thank you for inviting this consideration.
Thank you.
Let me bring Reddy, please.
What I had to say was that I feel like that is a question that we could add to the loom of soul inquiry, and it ties in actually perfectly with what has been said. And I feel like something that needs to be there is a question about how you can build trust within yourself. Because, and I know it's been mentioned before, but I feel like through trust in yourself is how you is where you get all of your internal validation. Because when you can show up for yourself in a way that you think is right for you without feeling the need to conform to society or be the person that everyone else wants you to be. When you show up for yourself, you build trust within yourself. And then you find the confidence and your inner self-worth in order to be able to attune to your soul and find out and like go through the steps that we were talking about before in order to I guess find that confidence to be able to listen to yourself, and when your gut and your soul is telling you something, to be able to trust it. So I feel like that's really important.
Beautifully said already, and also not always so easy to practice, because there are many circumstances where, I mean, the conductive phrase in what you said there was show up for yourself.
Yeah, that is kind of the solution that I would propose to that. Like for the little things, when you tell yourself that, you know what, I'm gonna follow through with something, or I'm gonna do something. When you actually go and you do it, it's like you give yourself a point. And then if you do that again and again and again and again, then you can trust yourself that if you set a goal, or if you tell yourself that you're going to do something, then you have more trust to yourself that you're going to do it, and trust builds on trust, so then you're more likely to do it.
That's exactly right.
In a way.
That's exactly right. Trust is a kind of internal currency. When you build that currency of confidence that you're describing, by showing to yourself in small steps that you can trust yourself, then so much else becomes possible for you. You and I could now have a conversation for 2 hours about trust, and we will build a whole loom. We will build a whole loom about trust, because, like, just for one example, we want to, in the first place, recognize that sometimes trusting yourself is not listening and not following the validation or the nudge from society, and that in other times the two don't always have to be mutually in conflict, mutually exclusive. The evolutionary biology is we are learning that we grew up in tribes, and if you did not have the validation of the tribe, you were left out in the cold. So something in us at a biological brain level is wired to, I have to get the validation of other people. If I don't get the validation of other people, it actually evolutionarily means death, or historically meant death. So now what you're describing is, no, it doesn't mean death. It actually is, I'm going to find and carve my path. So how do we juggle and toggle between building trust inside, in our own dialogue with the soul, which is the main focus for our inquiry here today, and then, well, actually leading others to build trust in their soul. So if you can't have other people agree with you, guess what? You begin to be a leader for them to a new possibility. So much to open about this. Were you going to say anything else already before I bring the...
No, I think you said it very well. I was just gonna add that I feel like kind of trust especially in yourself, and also that things are gonna work out for you. It kind of makes you deal with any like self-worth or validation issues. It helps you to forgiving yourself when you feel ashamed for maybe not listening to your soul at a previous time. It kind of opens a portal for you to trust your systems. It's basically kind of what you need for everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's all.
Thank you. So the other point you made is very important there. It is the point you made about making points with yourself. It's not about perfection. It's about making small points, small wins in your own dialogue with your soul. Let me bring Jerry into this, please, Jerry.
Hi. What I was coming to was along the lines of thinking that if we can understand the soul better, how it will enable us to give a better response as a human being. And I think the soul seems to be quite central in a family of faculties that are all invisible to us, like the instinct, like the emotions, like the mind. But, you know, this time that we've come to in the human progression, we're starting to take seriously what is a kind of unseen human anatomy that the world has been happy to include in its language. But now we're trying to look at it as seriously as the doctors of the past sought to understand the human physical body. So I feel that although we're still at the beginning, if we can start to understand the soul more realistically, that it's going to enable us as human beings. Perhaps in a way, you know, one of the problems with being human is you get so full of cross currents inside and dispersion and distractions that we're not as effective as we could be. But perhaps if we start to understand these unseen faculties better, something very significant can come out of it, as I'm sure it will, and almost introduce a new level of what being human is about.
Indeed, thank you. Thank you, Jerry. So the invitation to the deeper understanding of the soul and truly the deeper understanding of the entire unseen, invisible anatomy of the human system, human model, such that, as you're saying, those are not just characters that we semi-consciously, conceptually use by language, but that they have been more fully, consciously integrated, onboarded as part of what human life is. Thank you. Please, Peter.
What you were talking about before, in chapter 1, you described that one of the roles of the soul is to help us find our individual fulfillment. You know, we each have a unique fingerprint and we have a unique cosmology, and there's only one expression for the whole history of time that will be exactly like that. So the whole soul is trying to lead us to that fulfillment, that expression. But when you get to the service level and really a connected level, you can see that that fulfillment is within something bigger, the larger context, which you point out in one of the boxes. And what is that larger context? And what is the soul guiding us toward for our individual, we are individually fulfilling within a greater fulfillment, part of something else. I think that's what it seems to point toward. So I just wanted to, it's fascinating that it puts us there, that idea.
Thank you for this integration. So you demonstrated the practice of what we said, the practice of integration is actually a practice of recapitulation. When we add a new dimension of awareness, can we rethread it through all that was foundational to it, such that they do know that, by the way, when they build an operating system in software, when they install a new layer in the system, they need to run the system through all the layers. So here is this strange technological world in interoperability. So what we're doing here is actually addressing the natural human technology. And what we're saying is these processes, they naturally are integrating each other. So thank you for voicing and recapitulating this. Please, let's bring Janice.
So this turned up in as a response to one of the loom boxes there about, I guess, what gets in the way. And it turned up as a sort of cautionary note to self in terms of a previous slide. You were talking about the cleansing and the balancing aspect there. And in my experience, what I've come to realize is that it could be an interference when we don't have a proper perspective on the sense that we're not looking for perfection, we're looking for progress, and that there are certain things, even when we talk about different parts of ourselves, quote, being in conflict or in tension, that part of what it means for me to live a human life and not be, totally not incarnated, is that is a settlement, that is important, because there may always be certain areas of my life or certain parts of myself that seem to be in apparent conflict or tension. But it's often out of that conflict and tension that the greatest growth and learning occurs. So it's a reminder in the sense of, I'm not looking to get rid of anything, I may be looking at better ways to integrate or find ways for different parts of myself whose natures and whose goals might be very different or seem very different. But it's not about not expecting that to be there, because part of being human is I came here to sort of embrace it all. Learning how to navigate those differences can be very important. So I don't know what the question would be in terms of adding another box to it, but the sort of essence of, we're learning, we're in process. As long as we're moving toward that and not expecting perfection of ourselves, I think this facilitates a connection with the soul rather than interferes with it.
Yes, very important contribution. I don't know how would you frame it into a box, but into a frame on the loom, but it doesn't really matter. The bigger space you're opening is very attractive to build a whole loom by itself. One way to call it is what instead of perfection. and in your phrase, you said, it's not about perfection, it's about progress. And that's when, for me, it got very interesting, because we can then ask, progress into what? And then there is a whole discovery, again, not just with words and concepts. I want to listen to my soul, listen to my system. How do I feel the word progress? Well, the word, and then you said it's towards greater integration. That invited more of me. So can you stay here with me? Because I want to demonstrate with you, Janice, just the way I work with another loom, and then we'll bring other hands. So I want to demonstrate an example of building a loom in the idea of vertical learning discovery, and around the question of what is the nature of vertical depth activation learning. And it's kind of in the space we've been in. And let's see, I will model the way I actually go through the contemplative process, because the idea here is it's not a test where you need to find what are the right answers in each frame. It's how do you liberate your whole person discovery, mind, soul, and inner lives. And I am seeking here to demonstrate an example of depth activation learning. So my first question to myself is, what is the nature of vertical depth activation learning? So now I listen inside and I ask myself, okay, what would be an example of when I got to experience that in a way that will perhaps be accessible to just about any person on the planet? So I decided to go there, discovering that being triggered means I regress to an earlier age and stage on the development timeline. okay, so first of all, I give myself permission to feel what it feels like in that space. When I'm being triggered, can I see that being triggered has this downdraft of being pulled down my timeline to a way I was earlier in life, maybe all the way down to early childhood. And noticing then that when that occurs, that I suffer perception shutdown. In other words, when I travel down my timeline, the extended perception and awareness and perspective that were available for me before are not quite available in the same way. So now I'm in this place of watching with closed eyes or with open eyes, finding suddenly a location inside where I see both. I see the heightened awareness and perspective, and I also see the triggered place. And I'm not in either. I'm not in that place that just embraced a new perspective. I am witnessing both. And maybe I'm witnessing a whole continuum in between of the different responses I may generate. And I then reflected, well, realizing there is another realization there, that in that place of being triggered, the connective capacity dramatically diminishes, becomes unavailable. So I'm giving permission to consider, as you said, Janice, I don't need to get rid of it. This is not about me taking a pistol and shooting at this person that is the triggered person. That would be the unproductive response. It actually is recognizing, and that's where the loom goes next, noticing and appreciating, first of all, that the triggered pattern is an autopilot reaction. And here is what I was coming to. Recognizing that the reactive response represents a part of me that was left behind and not brought up to date, and is actually yearning to be integrated and yearning to be in the integration, disarmed from the unfinished business that it has. So when I go through this process in myself, I'm literally discovering that that's a vertical learning, because it awakens for me spaces in myself that are always latent, but are not necessarily always actively online. That's why it has this nature. When I do that, there is one more thing that then happens, which is, I begin to discover that what remains frozen in time often involves the unprocessed. Fear was mentioned earlier. Okay, Avshalom brought fear, a whole range of fears, but there are those pains and fears that are simply were not fully metabolized, and that they have in their way created their compensatory act. So I've gone through all these so far, the question and the 6 frames in response, and now I begin to feel on the inside that what it does for me is I am able to access in it a certain alchemical transformation. What I already described a few minutes ago as forgiveness, self-forgiveness. I don't have to be perfect. It's the point you made, Janice. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to make a decision that now for the rest of time, I will never be triggered. All it means when I'm being triggered is that I skated to the edge of my capacity to manage the situation I'm in. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I had an intensive week that tested me to the limit. Could be other environmental conditions, not excuses, but conditions that impacted me. So now I begin to access the broader sense of forgiveness, self-forgiveness, self-compassion, self-care, and there is an alchemical release that I begin to experience, a certain uplift that the whole of the pain and turmoil that these earlier frames contained, there is something sweet that's being released. And in that sweetness, in that forgiveness, I find that I'm able to retether, rejoin the sense of the love of life, my love for life, and the fact that life, as it expresses itself through me, can be experienced as the joy and love of life. And that what that means, that life loves me, is that I'm always afforded new opportunities. Just the recognition of that, the appreciation of that, the gratefulness of that, the spiritual, if I may say so, appreciation of this thing we call a human being. You're given another chance and another opportunity, including through struggle. So that's an example of how I use loom in the self-correcting, self-aligning, self-absolving, self-attuning way to give myself permission to, as you said, not be perfect. But because the only perfection there is being on the human journey to discover the next lesson. So I now created a new space here. If anybody wants to, given this, what would you add to this inside your contemplation, please?
Aviv, can I just make a response to
Please.
this incredible, beautiful sample that you've given us?
Please.
I mean, what I would add is that if I look at the box, noticing and appreciating that a triggered pattern is an autopilot reaction, what I would add to it is that I think it's more than an autopilot reaction. I think what it is, especially if the regression is in response to a trauma, it's that it was the best intelligent response at the time that I could make. And that puts a very different light on my ability to stay not identified with it, but to stay with it. It may cause me to lose perspective, but I could choose to stay with my feeling about that in a very different way. So I think, that for me would be an important way that I could come with all the things that you're saying, compassion and forgiveness. It's to reframe that as something that was very strategic on my soul's behalf, on my whoever it was that helped me in that instance. It had intelligence about it, and it may no longer be something that I want to continue to enact in my life because the circumstances are very different now. But at that time, it was a very intelligent response.
Beautiful.
Something that was beyond my capacity to handle.
Yes. So honoring and acknowledging that it was a very intelligent response at the time, or the best, most intelligent response at the time. And you're saying even beyond the absolving, the self-absolving alchemical process, there is a release of intelligence and an update of intelligence that's available there. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Let's see if we have any other contribution from anybody to this loom. And if not, we'll do another experiment. So are those new hands or are the hands? We have Lisa, Kiriki, and Liz. Anybody wants to contribute?
So what showed up for me was, I sense that there's an urgency. When I look at me and life and then the world, I pick up an urgency to be able to contribute to a greater, higher outcome. And there's a part inside me that I discovered that's like a horseback rider who's whipping at the horse. It's like, work harder, do more, get more done, get more light on this planet, get results. And this demanding harshness on myself for the bigger picture, it activates some type of a expectation, like an expectation for what I'm going to see or what we're going to see as a humanity. there's something at play here that I'm touching into. And where I landed was, I used the word to neutralize all of these conflicting parts, to neutralize them so that when I wake up each day or each moment throughout the day, I can be okay with where I am. Like, give myself those permissions to trust, back to the trust, and to get the sense that in being attuned to my soul's awakening, calling, that where I am, it's like, it's okay today and in this moment. It's something to give me some comfort or solace or ease, because I'm concerned, about the world. And I want to find a place where I can sit to reconcile that. So that's the next thing through this struggle.
Yeah. I don't think you'll be shocked if I said that I recognize that very much. that drive you're describing. So how are you doing with it? Is it working, the self-correcting brief you just offered?
It works.
Okay.
It works if you work it.
Yes. There is also, Liz, acknowledging that this industriousness or work ethic or whatever you'd call it served many of us tremendously well. It brought you to what it brought you. So how I process through a similar conundrum is through feelings and through sensing that when that arises with me, it's simply, more than anything, it's a nudge, it's a sign that I'm a little distanced from the presence-full life that I want to live. Because when I'm imbued with the presence of what I want to be joined to, I don't feel that I need to get busy. I am in the flow of that generation of well-being and wellness and what it guides me to do. So I've learned to recognize that part of the hard work ethic, industrious drive that can sometimes be self-punishing, I think that's the point you're making, is an operating system I have developed earlier in life, very much driven by the sense of yearning to be joined to the bigger reason as to why I'm here. And I think that's what you're describing. So this is something we probably grapple with through to the last days of our lives, but you naming it and offering guidance about it here is timely. Thank you very much. Let's bring Kyriaki, and then if we have time, I'll do another loom practice with you. Please, Kyriaki.
Yes, it's a question that is rising.
Please.
It has to do with the fact that the soul is like a guide, a GPS, to translate the map of what's going on in our life. But when that map is changing, it's like the soul cannot find some anchors to it needs to keep reprogramming. So how to attune to yourself is one thing, but in times of change is a completely different. Maybe we need another 3 hours. And just to say an example is that our soul is exposed nowadays to so much violence. We see all the day violence in the picture, in the social media, war, and I think this causes an apathy, not just to the personal soul, but also to the collective, maybe human soul.
Yeah.
And I'm worried about this apathy, because maybe it's the only way to cope with that so much violence. And I don't know what it does to the soul, really. Of course, what you said to Janice has many threads towards how to cope with it. But this aspect of attune to your soul in times of change.
Yeah. So Kira, you asked 3 questions. Let me see if I can. Your first question is about the updating of the soul in times of change. Your second question is about apathy. And your third question is about exposure to violence. Let me try and address each one of them separately. So I just loomed these in my mind, so I remember. In an earlier chapter, we talked about how is the soul of today, 2024, different from soul of 100 years ago, or even 10 centuries ago. And the invitation there was to recognize that, first of all, the function of the soul is to continue to guide you through changing environment. So in that sense, the function of the soul remains the same. However, through the evolutionary story of the human evolutionary story and the environment, the planetary environment, the emphasis and the preponderance of where and how the soul operates and which faculties, which parts of the human orchestra come to the foreground, that continually changed. So in what I just said there is an implicit appreciation that the soul has a capacity to adapt to a changing exterior environment by engaging in the interior human environment, a shape-shifting cosmology. So it's a two-way, a double helix kind of updating change. And so, like for example, just to instantiate what we said there now, the soul needed to, and Kira, this is something you and I and Karen are tracking in the Universalis conversations when we talked on several occasions about what was it that occurred around the times of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and then the scientific revolution, and how that was a phase that unlocked and activated much more of the intellect. So the soul rewired, reorchestrated that capacity. Why is a different story to come back to again another time? Why was it important for human life to activate more of the intellectual capacity, the intellect capacity? But that represented a time when the soul rewired itself. Now, when we take it more to recent times, we often reflect that brain science will have to account in the next 100 years to how did these smart devices that we're holding in our pocket and in our hand, how did they change the brain? There's no question that the brain has been rewired by these fast response mechanisms. One obvious way is, to an extent, we lost the capacity to stay with longer pauses of silence without the dopamine rush of the next like on social media. That's partly why we're practicing loom work, because it's a way to actually carve space. But it's one thing saying the brain, literally new synaptic connections were activated in the brain, and in same for my granddaughter who is here with us this weekend. She's 5.5, and her parents give her some tablet time. So how is it affecting her brain? And then how is it affecting her soul? How is the soul of a life arising now rewiring to facilitate and accommodate and navigate such an emphasized electronically charged technology? I will simply offer the following. The soul has the capacity to adapt to changing environment, number one. The soul has the capacity to adapt to unknown environment because it has this interface with the spirit and with the universal sources of intelligence of life, so it can manage. I mean, somewhere in one of the chapters, I'm asking, how is the soul accommodating, navigating, facilitating the human in when we propose that we only know of 5% of the universe. Right. The soul, I'm proposing the soul is actually tethered to the other 95% of intelligence. So the soul has the downloading capacity. Whether we accommodate for that, whether we have that conversational way with our soul to relax into these new possibilities is the human experience. So I'd hold it there to come back to another time. Right, let me do violence first and then apathy. You could say that human life has been exposed to horrific violence throughout the ages. So some of it is akashically lodged, and the know-how is lodged in the soul. The bigger risk for tremendous violence right now, and that's in reading the accounts of people that experienced and witnessed the most horrific violence, is when they say you can't unsee what you have seen. You can't unsee what you have seen, because what entered your conscious witnessing creates a scar. The challenge there is not just healing the soul, but healing the mind. This is where we need to deepen in the relationship between the soul and the mind. And what is it that the conscious witnessing life in you observed and witnessed in the case of violence? And I think if you comment to the degree of violence that has been exposed in the media and the production of, and if you monitor the Hollywood trajectory over the last 60, 70 years, essentially the way that worked is every time they pushed the envelope of a new sensory threshold. So I don't know when it was, in the 80s or the 90s, when the movie Jaws came out, people went to a theater and then they couldn't go to swim in the ocean because they were scared by that. It's because they opened a new threshold. So, but what Hollywood discovered was that to release that brain chemistry, they needed to every time push the envelope, push the envelope, push the envelope. So that's a very big problem. And all I will simply say is the following. If you're a person that decided that you want to be attuned to finer and higher presences and natures, you will significantly trim down violence, and you will especially trim down exposure to violence in the latter part of the day, in the evening before you go to sleep. So you don't just freshly load into your semi and unconscious vectors the impressions of violence. Because what happens when we go to sleep, we will process through these and they create their own tuning fork. They create their own resonance. So they bring more to you. So I have no problem to make the admission. It's been many, many years since I've watched any violent movie. I don't take in these impressions. I've chosen consciously to significantly trim and not take any to the degree that I can. Now, sometime if I choose to be up to date with the news, with places in the world that I care for, I will read. And sometimes you don't need to see visual impressions. You read and your mind conjure up the impressions, and they can be horrific by themselves. So there too, you need to be careful what you expose yourself to. And when you do, you need to have a conversation with your mind about it, and you need to have a conversation with your soul about it, so that you rehabilitate. And you even will explain to your soul why you allow those impressions, and you reason as to why, such that you can then absolve the scar. The last thing you brought, apathy, has both relates to violence, but not only. There are different reasons as to why people will experience apathy. And one is violence, but another is just the sheer volume of intensity of impressions and how we get so crowded. And what we earlier in the loom of what we need to overcome described as the energetic fragmentation. One of the greatest gifts we got was the power to say no to things. But the power to say no to things was meant to mostly guide us forward to what it was that we wanted to do. The postmodern world is one when we wake up and we keep needing to say no to things. And what it does is it actually exhausts that chemistry, that potential in the brain, that the part of our capacity in the nervous system to say no to things. So because of that, our shielding, if you like, our capacity to say no is deteriorating through the day. And one of the byproducts is apathy. And apathy is a spiritual condition of being separated from those vital presences and natures that we're naturally joined to, meant to be joined to. So apathy is a disease of the modern and the postmodern age. And right next to apathy, Kiriki, there is all that goes with loss of sense of meaning, loss of self-worth, and all the other words that you will put in the bucket with nihilism and cynicism, and these are disease. Those words, they represent a condition that is a disease for the mind. This is for the mind, and this is for the soul. So we're called to find the courage to turn inside and to rehabilitate the soul and rehabilitate the inner lives and dissolve and absolve those impressions, such that we can be again conductive to finer presences. In a sense, reclaim innocence for the soul. Part of a soul's journey is losing innocence and reclaiming innocence, losing innocence and reclaiming innocence. But how can you actually reclaim innocence after you lost innocence? Well, you'd have to engage in what we're describing here as a vertical. You'd have to find access to a new elevation into which, when you emerge in a new elevation, you're again in a virginal configuration in yourself. It carries no stain, no historic scar tissue, because you've literally entered a new domain, a new realm, a new capacity in yourself that was latent. So it's not that, as Janice said earlier, it's not that you pushed something out. It's that rather that you have entered a domain of possibility that it does the work on you. It absolves you, and inside of which you are allowed to reclaim innocence. So I think I created one more story through this very thing. Let me just run through this quickly and see what you will add to this one. So this is a depth activation of what you already know about happiness. Remember what I said about vertical learning is a depth activation. Nothing I'm going to say now is going to be new for you. You could probably create this loom by yourself. You'd maybe use different words, and everything I anticipate, you'd say, yeah, sure. So that's like retrieval of knowledge on the inside. Okay, most people want to be happy. I think most people would agree to this statement that most people want to be happy. Many are asleep to the deeper spiritual reality of being human and the significance of the soul and the spirit. I stay with that for a moment to feel my way with that. And so I say to myself, well, there are people who are attuned to the soul and the spirit. They won't call it this way. They won't use this language, but they will still be attuned to certain awareness and certain sensitivity. So there is a self-direction in me to hold this, but not in a place of judgment. I'm not judging who is attuning and who is asleep and who is not asleep. It's not for me or for anyone to render that judgment. It simply is an observation that many people are circumstantially, environmentally, by upbringing, by life circumstance, and by how they oriented themselves, they are asleep to the deeper dimension. Okay, so I stay with that, and then it brings me to this. Not only that, this is also something many of you already said earlier, which is that many are distracted by a multitude of things that divert them from deeper intuition, leading to an endless anxiousness and anxiety and fear of missing out and fear of I should be better this, and that's the point about self-worth that Margaret brought up earlier. All those noises that essentially consume our energy. It's just take all those preoccupations, they take us down from being a 10 out of 10 person to being a 7 or a 6 or a 5 or a 4 out of 10 person, because they consume so much of our energy. These are chronic conditions that continually lead us to never-ending preoccupation with survival concerns, material concerns, and other popularity concerns, and so on. So I'm again mounting the challenge in the face of the fact that most people want to be happy. And it leads me now to say that in the absence of natural, connected flow of the soul, spirit, essence, of what it means to be a human, then my experience is that most of the happiness and the joy that we experience is fleeting and ultimately empty. It doesn't have that sustainable, enduring, custodial, forever and ever beyond time sense that we will feel when we are deeply immersed in the realms and the presence of what human life, I believe, is never meant to be separated from, and I believe we are now seeking to deeply attune to and connect with, without which we are not as likely to solve the kind of challenges that humanity is facing. So I'm making here a contemplative journey with a loom to address the challenge of happiness in the modern and postmodern world. True joy and deep sustained happiness are found in a sense of meaning, a depth of meaning, a deeper sense of meaning, and richness of meaning. So I'm awakened to the whole mystery of what is meaning. Meaning is not a word. What is it that contains in this idea? And why is it that at certain times we experience a sense of meaning? And when we do, there is a brightness in the eye, and there is even the texture of the skin may change, and we are able to find interior resources and capacities that were not available a minute earlier. And we find courage and care and brotherly love and sisterly love and readiness to help others and be helped by others when we are uplifted inside the deeper meaning of what it means to be a human together with others. And then the sense of happiness is no longer the exhilaration of a short-term dopamine, sugar-like release. It echoes sometimes for hours and days and weeks. So much so that when we feel lonely, when we feel unhappy, we're able to actually tap on these experiences. When I feel a little down, when I feel, for some reason, we each have those moments when we feel isolated. They may even be astrologically initiated or something else. And I know what to do, and I feel the onset of that. I know who I need to call or what I need to call inside myself to overcome that interior state, because I should never allow more than a brief moment, even if that brief moment be an hour or two, to preoccupy me, because it's not natural to be divorced from that. Now, sometime you will experience days or weeks of struggle, and sometime it may even be an indication that you're entering a new octave of possibility, because sometime when you are entering a new connective possibility, you will need to metabolize in the integration phase the antithetical dimension of it. Right, so I will go to these places to call over all the people in my life, many of whom are here, and others, that I feel a sense of gratitude and a sense of connective purpose with, because it fortifies me. So being connected to a source of meaning and the flow that comes from it is where sustained joy can be found, in my experience. And attuning, therefore, to your natural soul configuration is an evolving journey of discovery that unlocks immense possibilities and mysteries. That's a journey we are on. And yeah, I want to wake up in the morning and lean into what I don't know, into the mysteries that I'm ready to unlock today. And that provides me with meaning. So I find meaning in what I find in the joining with others, and I find meaning in living into the mystery inquiries that I haven't resolved. And I will probably be into these mysteries to the last day of my life, because I've now conditioned myself to love more the what I don't know yet than what I even know. Because what that does, it creates a siphoning, it creates an induction. I'm living into the mystery that I haven't answered yet. And it provides me meaning rather than the false idea that I need to find meaning, but what I can control. No, I want to release, I want to let go of what I controlled yesterday so that I have space for more. So I find that deeply connecting with your spiritual nature and living and serving from that place in whatever way is right for you. There isn't just one way. There are as many ways as people. This is where true sustained happiness and joy can be found. So I created a space here to see if anybody would want to add anything to this loom. And Jeremy is ready. So please, Jeremy.
Yeah, to add an extra dimension, we're multiple lives. And I've recognized through my own experiences that they're all meant to do different things at a basic level, and then there's extras that they can do. So today, I felt like a tinge of sadness from part of myself, and I had to locate what that was. And I realized it was part of my physical life. I usually go running on a Saturday morning, and I hadn't. And so I thought, right, it was raining, but I got my running kit on and went out and had a run. and it was great. And then when I came back from that run, that sense of sadness was gone. And so this is a huge one, because the different parts of us have different needs. Like a family, different members of a family have different needs, and locating what those needs are and providing. Because I think when we say I am happy, perhaps that's quite more of a reflection on the consensus of the inner family and whether they're happy in what they're doing.
Jeremy, I've been alerted that I lost again the sense of time. So we passed our time. Thank you. Now, I would feel incomplete if I didn't take the extra 3 minutes to land this entire inquiry in one larger premise. So I'm going to skip this entire thing and I'm going to come here. We mostly today worked on premise 1, attuning to your soul. And I wanted in closing to land us in premise 2. And premise 2 is asking your soul to help you attune to a specific essence or nature that you want to attract to your life. It's one thing I'm saying, I'm going to attune to my soul. It's another thing I'm saying, I'm going to attune to, as we said, service. So you can choose to attune to truth. We could spend a couple of hours about how would you attune to truth. You could choose to attune to flow. How would you do that? Very attractive inquiry. You could choose to attune to care. I started signing my emails a few years ago with care because I felt that care was missing in the world. And I wanted to, every time I sign an email with care, I pause for a moment, I call up in me the value of care. You can choose to attune to healing. Healing has been a very important part of my life. You can choose to attune to resilient courage. So, and as you choose to attune to any of those natures or essences, you will attune to your soul attuning to those natures. And finally, you can certainly choose to attune to higher astral dimensions, higher astral realms, higher unseen spiritual actualities, to fill your life with presence that will get to work on you. So that's where I wanted to end this. And apologies for losing the sense of time once again. Yeah, thank you for being with all of us, being with me, being with all of us in this special day. And I bring it, Lisa, for you to call it a day. And I will stay here a little longer because I need some time to unwind a little bit together with others. But if somebody needed to leave, so let's bring it to a closure here, please, Lisa.
Oop, got a little foggy. I must have touched my screen. At any rate, thank you so much, Aviv. I can't even begin to say what you brought to the table here and to everybody. And I think you mentioned something really important. You said something earlier about service and being together in service to one another and how we're able to support, and I'm reading the words here, to be uplifted together, nourished, and then focused on our path. So there's so many different aspects that we got to today. I won't even begin to try to recall them, but to say thank you so much. And it takes a village, as they say. It's the community that we're building. And without everybody's presence, this process could never have happened. So thank you to all. And maybe Rob will play a little music because we don't want to leave too quickly.
Let's bring all our voices to say good day and good evening, wherever you are. And then we'll have Rob plays for us. So please, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.